to today's webinar, What IoT is Doing for the Electrical Industry and What It Could Do for You, with Legrand. I'm your host, Timothy Johnson, Digital Editor for Electrical Contractor magazine. Before we get started, I need to go over some housekeeping items. The audio for today's presentation should be coming through your computer speakers or headphones. If you prefer to call in, there's a toll-free number in the event info panel. If you have other difficulties, please reach out to me using the chat window. Also, please note that today's presentation is being recorded, so if you miss anything or something comes up and you have to leave, you can come back at your convenience. Finally, there will be time for Q&A after the presentation. You can submit questions through the Q&A box or comments in the chat box. If you're having trouble finding those features, hover your mouse at the top of your screen. A control panel will drop down and you should see those options. Now on with the show. Our presenter today is Tom Cunningham. As a senior product manager at Legrand, Tom has spent the last 2 decades utilizing his technical and strategic experience to drive innovation and advancement in the connected home marketplace. Today, he's focused on the IoT, developing electrical wiring devices and standards which deliver the simplicity and connectivity homeowners crave, while ensuring ease and profitability for the contractor. On behalf of Electrical Contractor magazine, I want to thank you all for attending. Now I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Tom Cunningham to get started. Tom?
Thank you very much, and thank you everyone for joining today. Appreciate the intro and you taking time out of your day. I know for some of you it's the afternoon and some it's still the morning, but what I wanted to do was share a little bit with what we've been learning over the course of the last few years. We spent quite a bit of time re-looking at the market, thinking about smart wiring devices and IoT, and where smart wiring devices are going to go both for us as well as for the industry. So during that time, we did a lot of re-looking at the markets, where we play, who we play with, and how the industry in and of itself may change, new partners, new entrants, all those types of things. So the purpose of today's show is to get you a little insight into some of the things we've been learning as we've been going over the course of the last few years. So there is a little bit of lag, as we're understanding, on the slide deck. You should see the first screen that comes up, and it says, where have we been and where are we going? And what I really wanted to do with this slide was just kind of preface a little bit on where we really started with all of this and where we see it going. The leftmost icon is meant to indicate the pre-IoT days, as you might know it now. Manufacturers like us working with contractors like you, installing whole home lighting control systems, many devices to create compelling solutions for customers. Apps did come, but not necessarily the primary means and control, and apps really came at the later point of when all this went. The middle is kind of showcasing with where we're at today, with a lot of these smart wiring devices showing up, especially you probably see it in advertisements in the Best Buy, or you might see it at Big Box. With a lot of these plug-in types of devices, you know, user-friendly consumer devices that just plug in to turn on, with voice being the means of control for a lot of these devices. And really, we'll talk about that in this presentation, about how the value proposition for lighting has changed relative to the advent of voice. And lastly, to the right, what we'll talk about during the presentation is where we think this is really going to go, and how this is going to be important for us as an electrical industry, and all of the positive things that will come of it as we continue to move forward. So to that, what I wanted to talk a little bit about was some of the important events that we happen to see. So again, that house on the left is illustrating where we were before the Alexas, the Googles, and even before Nest. We used to make these systems where you put in a whole bunch of lighting controls in a house to create a compelling solution for a customer. And then I'd ask you to remember that the Nest thermostat, which came about in October 2011, it really redefined what a smart thermostat was for a customer. Now for $250, you could completely revamp your HVAC system in your house and get an entirely new situation that used analytics, that used AI to learn how you worked and lived inside your home, to customize it. And then that lightning bolt, or that chasm there in the middle, is trying to showcase when Alexa launched, and that happened in November of 2014. The advent of voice really has started to change all of the IoT world, and especially beneficial to us making smart wiring devices. When you look all the way to the left, we used to have to put in many, many devices into a house to create a compelling experience for customers. Now with the advent of a voice assistant with Alexa and then Google in 2016, is we now have the ability to just with the groceries in our hands, walk into the kitchen and say, Alexa, turn on the kitchen light. It totally redefined the value proposition that a lighting control. We no longer needed to have many, many devices to create that experience. With these voice assistants, we could now do it with simply one device. And so the three outlets you see there as we move right is really showcasing what you see a lot. And if you've ever gone on Amazon or you've looked on some of the other big box stores, you see a lot of these plug-in products, and especially lately we're seeing a lot of names you've probably never heard of, import products coming in. And again, that reason is because Amazon and Google have made it so simple for you to then just simply control a plug-in type of device, whether that be a lamp module, coffee maker, or something to that effect. So while that's not the best thing for us right now in our world, what it's really doing is it's laying the groundwork for customers that are going to want to do more as they go forward. And so that's what that house on the right is trying to indicate, is the DIY products are actually going to make way for the do-it-for-me, because customers are going to want to adopt. We know most customers don't like to go inside the wall, so as they've gotten a taste for this new technology, they're going to want to expand, and that's going to give us a lot of new opportunities as we go forward. So what I want to do now is talk to you a little bit about the key voice assistant facts that we have. And so, like I said, we've been doing a ton of research on this, and it really became clear. You can actually see in the data the rapid change in smart wiring devices, along with a host of other IoT products, once Alexa launched there at the end of 2014. We now know that smart speakers reach 57.8 million in the adult U.S. population, and this comes from a VoiceBot consumer adoption report that actually came out earlier in 2018. We're actually expecting that number to grow significantly. These reports tend to come out in this February-March timeframe. We know that 53% of customers that have these smart speakers use them daily. 80% of them use them at least monthly. And one of the interesting facts that we're now seeing in some of the latest data is that we see that 1/3 of these customers that use smart speakers are also using them to control other devices in the house, such as the types of devices we make, lighting controls, outlet switches, dimmers, all of those different types of things. And lastly, that bullet at the very bottom, I think, is very telling, because it tells us smart speakers, there's actually an average of more than 2 per home, which means that people are putting in multiples of these devices. They may have done it because they want to have control from multiple locations. They might have done it because they want to do multi-room audio from one of these from more than one location. But in the end, the real reason for this, and that is good for us, is that it gives us the ability to have multiple control points throughout the house in which we can expand the types of devices that we make as an industry. And so to give you a little bit more insight on the right-hand side there, it just kind of shows you in the U.S. what that smart speaker share looks like. So if you had seen on the last slide, Amazon had a little bit of a head start on this relative to Google. And so in the U.S., they've had the largest lead at 65%. You see Google there at 20%, and then the others. If any of you are on the line from Canada, it's actually a little bit different than that. Amazon didn't have the huge lead up in Canada, and actually Google owns the primary interface at 65%, Alexa at about 30%, and the balance maintain the rest of the different types of connection points in the home. So again, we looked at what customers were doing. We looked at what the industry was doing. We spent a lot of time doing a lot of consumer research. And we asked a lot of the questions, what do they like, what don't they like, why did you buy this, or frankly, why didn't you buy this? We heard things like security, we're waiting for standards to evolve. You get customers that said, so what, I can turn the light on and off with my voice. And then there's actually quite a few reasons that customers really did want to get into this and why we have seen the adoption start to really pick up. It drove into these 3 buckets I have here, which is convenience, security, and comfort. We put up there just ask. Customers love to use their voice in order to control these types of things. So Alexa, turn on the kitchen light, or hey Google, turn on my dining room. People want the ability to know that they can control their lights when they're away from their house, so that as they're coming home, or perhaps a child coming home from school at a time that wasn't expected, that the lights can be on for them. And they want the ability of these devices to really take shape in the way that they live within their house. Think of movie night or entertaining and those types of things. It's now becoming easier and easier to adapt the home to meet those types of applications. And again, voice has been a strong push to allow that to happen. We also did the same thing with contractors and with distributor partners, asking them the same questions. Excuse me, I had to take a drink. You know, we asked a lot of questions about what works for them, what doesn't work for them, what they're seeing. And, you know, we got a lot of great answers. We got some funny ones as well. We heard over and over again, just make it wire like a regular wiring device. I don't need that thing from the Star Trek. Smart devices should work and look like existing devices. Again, this actually came up on the consumer side as well. There's a lot of devices that tend to come to market that don't really look like they fit in a home. And so over and over again, we've heard that design aesthetics are important to both customers and, again, to the contractors that are installing those for customers. These things need to be simple and easy to connect to a network. You can't ask us to have special skills. Give us an easy way to do this. Let us use our smartphone to set this thing up. The product packaging that it comes in, it needs to sell itself. You need to have that, so if I show a customer this packaging, they can understand what it is. And we need ways to better tell the story of what IoT is and how we're going to do this. And then lastly, it comes down to a little bit of the installation, and we have different buckets of contractors. Some contractors want to do the full install. They want to own the whole interface with the customer, take them through upsell, and both install and give them the comprehensive system, whether it just be a simple lighting control or maybe they're going to integrate in some other products. Or we also have others that are just saying, hey, look I don't want to do all that. I'll install the product because it installs just like a regular wiring device, but I want to let the homeowner do it, or the Geek Squad, or whoever else it is, install that product. And so those are the key takeaways that we've learned on what's going on with the contractor today and where they want to go. So continuing on, give you a little bit of a dive into Alexa. I'm sure you're aware of them, but if you're not, Alexa is now on 100 million devices, and this gives you a little flavor of the types of devices that they sell. They also are embedded in third-party products, including wiring devices. If you've seen any of the announcements out of CES this year or last year, you've seen products come out by various wiring device manufacturers that have actually embedded in voice into the wall switch or have announced plans that they're going to do so. And this ecosystem that Alexa has created with the voice allows it to control upwards of 20,000 different types of devices. That number comes from Alexa in a report that they gave out last month. And in 2019, as we start to look, we talk about how great Alexa is and all that it's doing, but we also realize that in some cases they may be competing with us. Now, the smart plug market I mentioned earlier has been growing like crazy on that DIY side for them, and probably why they announced the Amazon smart plug that you see in that bottom right of the screen. But again, we believe longer term that as customers become more acclimated to what and how these products work, they're going to want help installing the more integrated parts into the home, switches, dimmers, outlets, and those types of devices. There is a segment of the marketplace today that does DIY, and some people that will, assuming that it's applicable in their markets. But by and large, and in fact, even in reviews, and you can look for yourself if you go to look at some reviews online of various different in-wall products, you'll notice quite a few of them will say, I installed one, but I'll call my electrician for the next one I want to do. And lastly, on those smart plugs, again, we're seeing a ton of those come in, and just so you're aware and updated, there is a large portion of offshore products now coming in, and if your customers start to ask a little bit about those, make sure that if they're insistent on using them, that they meet the regulatory standards that we have here in the U.S. we've seen quite a few products come in with a CE mark for Europe, maybe an FCC mark, but there's no safety markings on it whatsoever, so we don't know and probably assume that they may not have gone through safety testing. So just something to keep in mind as you go forward. The other one I want to talk to you a little bit about is Google and the Google Assistant. So Google, again, they got a little bit of a late start relative to Amazon, but have been gaining market share in a very, very large way. They're actually on more than 1 billion devices when you want to include the smartphones. And they have an ecosystem of about 10,000 devices right now that can be controlled via the voice assistant. And you notice at the bottom I threw in some icons of some of the major companies that are working with Google to also integrate the Google Home Assistant into each one of their products. So LG, JBL, Polk, Panasonic, Sony, Anchor. You're actually going to see these showing up inside of TVs as well if you haven't already seen it. So again, these voice assistants are going to continue to take off. They're going to continue to allow us to sell more and more of our types of products to create compelling solutions for our customers. There are some others that are out there as well that I wanted you to also know about as far as the Google Assistants, the Amazon Assistants. You've probably seen Siri before. So Siri is a virtual assistant, not unlike Alexa or Google. It's really in on Apple's ecosystem that they call HomeKit. Apple will claim up to 500 million devices between their iPhones and the latest laptops that have the ability to use this feature. Cortana, you see at the bottom left there, that's actually Microsoft's voice assistant. It's built into Windows 10, it's built into Microsoft hardware, think of headphones, think of Xbox, and they're talking about 400 million devices that have the ability to be controlled by Cortana. On the upper right-hand corner, if you have a Samsung phone of recent vintage in the last few years, you probably have Bixby. Bixby is another voice assistant that Samsung is working to integrate into their 500 million annualized devices that they make. And lastly, we can see a future where there may be some of these voice assistants that won't connect to the internet. They'll just be local to the room in which they're in, but they'll still recognize voice. So I call those embedded voice assistants, and so those are the types of devices that you don't connect to the internet, you don't connect to your home network. They're just there in the room to take commands and do what it is. So think of the years gone by with the old clapper. It's really a much more intelligent version in which you can gain control over the devices that are in that particular location in the house in which you're at. So if you haven't used or had any of these voice assistants, you might ask yourself, why is it such a big deal? Well, it's a big deal because it's made it very, very easy. It's made it very, very simple. You can just say, Alexa, turn on the kitchen light, or hey, Google, dim the home theater to 20%. Same thing with Siri if you've got the HomeKit ecosystem. And one of the things that these products have done is they integrate in with other systems. So I have a lighting system, and I have a skill for my lighting system that can integrate in with Alexa as an example. And how you do that is inside of the Alexa app. You go into that, and you add the skill for my product. What that does is you're telling Alexa, or you're giving Alexa permission to have information about the lighting control that you have in your house. And so with that, Alexa knows when a light has gone on. It knows when it's gone off. It knows that you've dimmed to a certain level, and it knows if you've changed state, whether or not you're in the Alexa app or not. Amazon will know that that's happened, and what that allows Alexa, and Google's the same way, it allows you to do things like create groups, and you might create groups of disparate manufacturers. So you could have lighting control from me, you might have a light bulb from someone else, you might have an audio system from someone else. It gives you the ability to then create things like groups. You might create a scene like movie time, or you can even create these routines, which can be step-by-step types of things. And again, this allows you to take products from one manufacturer, couple them with other manufacturers, so now you create a compelling experience in your house. And Alexa and Google both allow that to happen. Siri also will allow that to happen, living in and on their HomeKit ecosystem. But along with that, you have to think about some of the things that make this important for the customer. And you really want to start to think about two things, and we hear it all the time today, and that's privacy and security. And so as we look at this, privacy is all about all the data that these devices on, off, predictive maintenance, predictive insights, knowing if someone's home or not home based on what it's being there. You want your privacy to be yours. And on the other side, there's security. We as manufacturers have to make sure that what we're doing, we are opening up security holes into your house. We have to always take that security as important. So I threw up some of the quotes that you might see from, or that have been in the news somewhat recently, and not meant to scare you or anything like that. It's just some of the things that happened. So the first one here is, at the end of last year, Amazon actually listens as you're telling it things to do. It actually stores those. And you can actually delete those if you want to via the Alexa interface, alexa.amazon.com. But there have been things where there have been glitches, and there have been issues where privacy has been invaded inadvertently. And so what's happened is governments have really started now to weigh in on these types of things, both overseas as well as in the U.S. In May of 2018, the European Union put GDPR, which stands for General Data Protection Regulation, into effect. In a nutshell, it's really about trust. So end customers can trust that the data that they have and create will be properly handled and secured. It also makes clear that the customer owns the data, and that there are provisions that for you as the customer can sit there and say, you know what, I don't want you to have that anymore. And you can be essentially deleted from a system. So that's gone live, and it's in effect now in the European Union. Last year, I think it was last year, it might have been the year before, that California also authored some privacy. So in 2020, the CCPA, which stands for the California Consumer Privacy Act, is going to go into effect. And what this does, this boils down to being about the end user knowing what personal information is going to be collected, requesting access to the data manufacturer, request access to the data. So us as manufacturers just can't go grab what it is that whatever we want. You know what the information is. So for example, if we need to know that a light is on, a light is off, that you've dimmed to a certain level, that you know that we're collecting it and why we're collecting it. And so what we're all about is really trying to gain this transparency of your data and where it's going, because we really believe that this is going to be absolutely critical to the future of IoT. Anytime that we see data invasion or privacy or security issues, it actually is going to slow us down as an industry. And I'm speaking holistically as IoT across all industries. Privacy and security are critical. They have to be the most important thing that you think about whenever it is that we're doing whatever it is we do. It's absolutely critical. So I told you a little bit about, what's been going on, where things are at, and then the question often comes, okay, where is this market going? And so as we look at where this market's going, I'd ask you to see, I'm actually going to figure out some of your ages. If you've recognized any of these, you probably were on a computer in the 90s or in the early 2000s, things like America Online, CompuServe, MSN, Apple had eWorld. And what this does is this kind of shows you the way in which we all used to get our information many, many years ago. Before the advent of the internet, you had these different types of service providers, and they were really curated environments. They were environments in which you went in and you had this whole experience of a community that was connected. And there were some hooks out to some things that the internet was starting to become, but again, they were very curated environments. But as we went over time, we started to see a change. And those of you that remember the advent of the internet, I always put up this HTTP, the hypertext markup language, this really set forth where everything was going to go. This was a language that became uniform, that devices could talk. It no longer was this ecosystem, that ecosystem, or the other ecosystem. It was really about, let's have a standardized language in which these computer devices can talk. And what happened, you ended up with the browsers that all showed up, the original being Netscape, Navigator, and you probably remember Internet Explorer, and certainly we all have Chrome and Safari and Firefox and all those today. It allows you, because a standardized language came about, and there's more than just this language, but because a standardized language came out, you now have the ability to have a much more comprehensive, a much more interactive, and really an untapped way of tying devices together. And we all know what happened with the internet once all of that happened. So really, what we think is, we think that the markets of these IoT, I would equate the same thing that happened back in the day with America Online and CompuServe and MSN and the others, will start to happen with these IoT devices as we move forward. We'll start to migrate to IP-based networks, Internet Protocol-based networks. In fact, the I in IoT stands for Internet. And what that'll mean is that devices, as we continue to go forward, will be able to work more seamlessly with another as they all start to talk a similar language. So as we talk a little bit about now where we are and where we've been, you know, the question is what do we now know? So we can tell you from the data, and we've got a ton more data that's out there. I've mentioned the voice data significantly in here, and again, I use that only because we see the trajectory of IoT devices just absolutely taking off and matched up one-for-one with what's going on with the voice assistants. And we can see that data in retail, and we're now actually seeing it in the electrical channel, starting to take a significant lift. For a while there, when we got started, we didn't actually see a lot of IoT devices actually selling. Alexa came out, and then all of a sudden we saw it skyrocket. And it really skyrocketed first at Amazon, but then everyone else has started to follow. And so that was a few years ago. And now the data that we're seeing right now, and we're expecting to get a lot more good data over the course of the next few months, is we're really starting to see that lift happen outside of the e-commerce world and really into the world in which we live and play inside of the electrical channel. So we believe that more and more of these products are going to be installed by professionals as we go forward. And I would say that second bullet there of the trend moving beyond the early adopters, that initial foray has really been driven by these plug-in devices that you would see. I failed to mention on an earlier slide, the #1 supplier of electrical wiring devices has been, at Amazon, has been a company called TP-Link. And that company is not an electrical manufacturer. They were making networking products. And they sold just tons and tons and tons of these plug-in modules that worked with Alexa. They were one of the very first devices that did so. But again, we're starting to see that change as we move forward. There's going to be those customers that want those plug-ins, but we're seeing that customers, after they've gotten their appetite whetted with these smart devices, are now starting to want to grow that and grow that into their homes. And we know that the vast majority of those customers don't want to do these installs themselves. They want a professional to do that. And so we're seeing that lift uptake in electrical, and we expect that we'll continue to see that uptake. And we also know that inside the house that the looks are also important. So the trend for us here in the EV world is going to be very, very good. And I think voice, AI, which is some of the predictive stuff that's going to actually learn how people live, work, and play in their homes and improve, as well as other advancements that we probably haven't thought about, are going to continue to grow the smart marketplace and create really new use cases for us to have in homes and light commercial and into commercial that we do. I should have mentioned early on as we started, my focus over the last few years has been primarily resi. However, it doesn't apply just to resi, it applies straight up through commercial, and there are a number of things that we look at as we go forward. We really, really believe that we're in a very, very good place because customers do now and will need the support of our electrical teams to have their devices professionally installed in their homes. We're really, really excited about what's going on. We had made some predictions that we expected this to happen, and really the second half of last year, it's really starting to show itself. So there's a lot of upside coming for us in the electrical industry. And again, for you as the contractor installing, you can do something as simple as, you know what, I don't want any part of getting the setup, or I don't want to do the app and all that. You can just go install the devices. They work like standard switches and dimmers. And then someone else, whether it be the homeowner or someone else is going to do that. On the flip side, you can be the end-all be-all for your customer and provide the total solution for installing those products, and perhaps even looking at integrating in some other products that are out there. And really, anywhere in between that can be your strategy from where to go. But I do believe that you're going to be seeing a significant uplift, a significant increase in the amount of people asking for help in installing these types of devices. So I've managed to talk pretty fast, and I've gotten us to the end of our deck a little quicker than when I rehearsed it. I imagine there's a bunch of questions that might have come up. So, Tim?
Yeah, great. Thanks, Tom. So before we get to the questions, I actually had one myself, if you don't mind. You said something earlier about homeowners saying more than they used to that, you know, they installed their first IoT products and now they're looking for electricians to do their next ones or the ones in the future. Do you have like a ballpark figure on that, you know, like a percentage?
We're actually trying to work out more specifically around that. It's actually pretty significant. So there's actually a number of places you can get that. So I think I mentioned during the presentation anecdotally that we see, you can actually look for yourself if you go look for reviews on Amazon or some of the big box stores, is you'll see people, hey, this was a lot more to install than I thought. You know, people, we all know that the challenges that can sometimes be exhibited in the way that homes are wired, so they get to be a challenge. But what I didn't mention during that, and what we did on one of our developments, is we did a consumer trial with a number of participants. And these were people, we actually had looked for very, very specific personas, people that were willing to go inside the wall, people that were willing to do this, because we were really trying to test some of the materials that we had, videos that we were doing, things of that sort. And quite a few of those, the homeowner piece of that, because we also had electricians that were a part of this study, quite a few of those, and I'd have to go look to give you a percentage number, but quite a few of those happen to be, tell us that, you know, they like the product, but if they were going to do more, they'd install more. I'd also add that as we work with bloggers and things of that nature, as we're trying to get the word out, we found that almost exclusively the bloggers never install the products themselves. They hire electricians to install them. So my guess is it's more than a fair bit more than half, but we have some homework there to figure that out, and maybe we should follow up with that a little bit later in the quarter.
Yeah, I think that'd be interesting. All right, so first question we got from the audience is, how stable are these devices? What if I want to pitch this to elderly or disabled who may not be able to interface with an app?
Fair question, and so in a lot of cases, and in fact the case in which the product that we have, the app can be used simply to just get it set up initially. And so you set it up to make the secure connection to the cloud, and so that you can then set up Alexa or Google, whichever your choice is, and you actually don't even need to open the app again. You can do all of the commands verbally via any of the voice assistants. So the app is not absolutely critical. It's really only critical to do the initial setup. You might want to set up things like if you have outdoor lights, you might want them coming on at dusk, off at dawn, you know, certainly following the daylight and sunrise and sunset, rather, schedules that happen to be going on. But the app is not, in most devices, are not required other than initial setup if you plan to use a voice assistant.
So it sounds like the contractor could set up these products like as an automation sense, and then the homeowner wouldn't really have to deal with it anymore?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. You can absolutely do that. And just if you don't mind, I might add a point. There are a lot of neat things that are going on in this industry, and there's third-party companies that make ways in which you can notify. We actually have seen a few people put in some of these switches into parents' houses, and with a third-party system which is called If This Then That, IFTTT, they get a text message to know when a light was turned on or off, so they know whether or not mom or dad got up in the morning. And there's a lot of different ways in which elder care can be tied into this. That actually did come up in the market research. It's something that I know we are and others will be paying a lot of attention to as we go forward.
Yeah, so it sounds like there's a lot of potential for contractors to educate themselves on the potential that they have, and then sort of, even if their customer isn't savvy, be able to offer these, various options that they could set up for them, and maybe even, have a service potential thereafter.
Absolutely.
Cool. On that note, there's another question about EC familiarity. So what would you say is the minimum familiarity an electrical contractor would need to have to start, getting into the IoT stuff?
Well, I think one of the things, I'll speak specifically for our organization, but I know that this has got to be on the minds of other manufacturers. We really try and design so that you can have absolutely no experience whatsoever and install the products without a problem, physically install them. They work like switches, they work like dimmers, they work like outlets, out of the box without even getting the app out and getting it set up to do all of the control via app or via voice. And then really to do this, to get it set up beyond that, if you've been able to join your smartphone to your home Wi-Fi network, you probably have the skills that are required to do a lot of these products. The product that we have, for example, it has a little QR code on the front of it, so after you physically installed it and you download the app to set it up, you simply click the plus button to add a device, the camera will pop up, you scan that QR code, and then it's going to walk you through a process of teaching it how to connect to your Wi-Fi network. It's really that simple.
Great. One of the questions that just came in, I want to jump up. A listener had a question about the if-then company. It was if this, then that, right?
If this, then that, correct.
And that's an app, right? I think it's IFTT.
IFTTT.com, I believe.
Right, okay. So there you go. Next question. How do you see the effect on commercial electrical industry? I know you said that you're more resi, but can you speak broadly on commercial?
I can a little bit. We actually have another team inside of Legrand that focuses on commercial. But we see, certainly as you go forward, and we talk about all the things, and depending on where you are in the country, going to net zero buildings, facility managers want to know and understand what's going on in their buildings. They want to know and understand, what power is being used where, to know whether or not something was left on. Those types of things. So we absolutely see IoT taking full force inside of commercial buildings as well. Some of the underlying technologies might be a little bit different just because of the scale of some of those buildings. A house is a little bit different in size than some of these mega complexes, but it's not even if it is, it's actually already taking off, and we're seeing it. We're also seeing it with hospitality partners as well, that are wanting to offer smarts into all of the various different hotel rooms and main spaces that they have in their buildings. So absolutely taking off, and there's different customers for that. So you have facility managers, sometimes it's a building owner, sometimes it happens to be the classroom, if it happens to be a school or something to that nature. So lots of upside commercially, and there's a ton of work going on in the electrical industry right now with us manufacturers to try and make that simple.
Okay. On that note, there was another question on the commercial side for multi-office Is there a system that can be installed, or would this be only for individual devices?
So what I was referring to in a lot of the Alexa and Google today, this is typically residential, which is going to be your home, or maybe have a vacation home and that type of place. On the commercial side, they really can be done in the manner in which you want to do them. So you can have multi-location, you can have dashboards into multi-locations, those types of things. I'm not the best one to give you all the answers on that one, as we have teams that are dedicated to that. But I can tell you that in many ways, if there's a way that you think that you want to do it, you can likely do it.
Okay, great. All right. I know we sort of touched on this a little bit ago, but are there any opportunities for passive recurring revenue in this industry?
So monetization is a big focus for all of us to try and figure out how to make money ongoing. So there are certainly things that can be done the more traditional ways of service fees, or I'll manage your system. Commercial is a big place where that is also very, very applicable. There are a lot of technologies that are being worked on to try and create even more value for end users. One of the things that came up in the market research we did with consumers is that there is a lot of fatigue on the monthly recurring, and that's why I think you've seen thus far in this that you haven't seen lighting as a service, or perhaps value add that require monthly fees. Customers just haven't been willing to do it at this point. But it is something that is all of us, I'm sure, are working on, trying to figure out ways to create more and better value that we can further monetize. So that's an ongoing challenge for the whole market.
Okay. Some questions on power. How sensitive are these devices to surges, and how do we protect from that? In addition, how well will these devices work in older homes with knob and tube wiring?
Yeah, so great question. So, you know, we build in, I can't speak for every manufacturer, but those of us that make wiring devices know what typically happens in a lot of these homes. What we do is we try and build in for those types of things that happen. We've never, at least at this point, run into that issue with anyone blowing one of these things out because of surges. Again, we build that into the product. The second question, I think, had to do with the knob and tube. One of the challenges, and I should have mentioned this earlier, is a lot of the wiring devices that you're going to find at this point in time are based on requiring a neutral in order to work. So, for example, the product line that I just had is a Wi-Fi based product, and it was designed to go in, do a handful of devices, no hub required, but it does require that neutral. If you have a cell phone, you know about every day or so you got to recharge it, and that's because the Wi-Fi and the radios in there tend to take up a lot of juice. So that means we need to be constantly powered. There are some technologies that are out there on the marketplace that are much more friendly to battery. So I would expect that you'll see the industry as we start to get our foothold going here, as we'll expand beyond some of these, so that those two-wire old knob and tube homes can start to get those types of applications. But I think right now the preponderance of the products that you're going to see are going to have neutral. Not all do, but when they don't, they tend to have some limitations because in order to keep the radios alive inside of each one of those endpoints, you got to sneak a little bit of current through a device.
Gotcha. So on that subject, I'm sorry if I missed it, but do they need to retain the memory after a power outage? Is there any, you know, if the power goes out, do they store the settings, or can that be messed up?
No, absolutely. All of your settings are stored on a power outage. So anytime that you recycle power, you end up down in the circuit panel to shut anything off, turn them off, or have them come back on. Those settings are all stored. That would be a little frustrating if that was the case. So, yeah, again, I can't speak for every product on the marketplace, but It's in there. Once you've set it up, it's going to be there. We have devices that we test all day long. They remain unplugged for a month, then we go back, plug them in. They're all just ready to go.
Cool. So you guys thought of that. Okay. How do you think the automation capabilities of these devices will evolve? I have Apple HomeKit, but what can I create as automatic functions is limited?
Yeah, I think what you're going to see, and again, I think this goes back to what I was trying to mention there about IP networks and how you really saw the internet really take off when they started to really the hypertext markup language, that HTTP you put before everything you do when you're typing in a web browser, really kind of changed the game for the internet. And we expect that we're going to start to see some of that as devices will continue to migrate to a more standardized language as we go forward. The question is how fast. I would tell you that the big platform players, whether it be Apple, Google, Amazon, there's some others in some backup slides that we had was you think of SmartThings or Wink. They're constantly trying to figure out ways to improve them. I would suggest, and without divulging anything that I'm not allowed to divulge with all these meetings I end up in, I would suspect that you're going to see continued improvements into how the ecosystems will continue to talk as we go forward. So this stuff tends to move very, very fast. And we see very, very big companies like the Googles and Alexas and Apples make decisions, and you wouldn't believe how many engineers are working on some of these projects. So they tend to move very, very quickly, and it's our job to react quickly.
Gotcha. Some questions on communication between the products. Do you know anything about the old X10 protocol and if these devices are compatible with it?
So X10 was a protocol that came about, I should know this, I remember back in the day doing it, and then its predecessor UPB. In order to make X10 work with other devices, someone is going to need to build some type of a bridge or an interface to allow that to talk to other devices. I haven't kept up on X10 to be able to answer that one to know whether or not anybody has, but it is technically possible to do that. So X10 happens to be one that was powerline-based UPB. I built years ago powerline networking products. It's technically feasible to make those talk to pretty much anything. The way that Alexa and Google work is they allow you, if you want to write connectors to talk and work with their system. So I think it's a matter, we'll have to do an internet search to see if we can figure any of that out for you.
Gotcha. More on that. Do these devices require Wi-Fi to communicate with each other, or do they connect some other way?
I'm going to actually go to an appendix slide if we're still broadcasting that.
Yep.
There's actually a whole host of different ways in which devices talk today. So what I have up on the screen here actually happens to be that powerline, that X10 you were talking about. There are products that are Wi-Fi based, products Bluetooth based. Z-Wave has been popular here in the U.S. A lot of security systems and ISP types of companies have had integrations in with Z-Wave types of products. Zigbee is a tremendously large platform, much bigger outside of the U.S. right now than inside. Thread is a technology. Think of it as low-power Wi-Fi that was developed by Google and then opened out for others to use. It's a relatively new technology. We all have proprietary technologies. A lot of us have those in our legacy systems. Then things like Power over Ethernet and some of these others. So the way that a lot of these systems today have been communicating back and forth and with each other have been through a number of ways. So you can do it via some of these platforms, like a SmartThings platform from Samsung is a way that a lot of these things happen, or a Wink. You can think of Amazon and Google as a platform. So if you have the Amazon skill or the Google skill built in, now via the Alexa or the Google app is you can have multiple disparate products actually working together as one. What might not be apparent to a lot of people is inside the Amazon, or excuse me, the Alexa app or the Google app, if you've connected a skill to a wiring device like mine or a light bulb from Philips or someone like that, is they'll all show up on the interface inside of that Alexa app or that Google app so that you can have control of multiple disparate manufacturers all at the same time.
Great. Let's see, next question. So let's say you have devices that are connected over their wireless network. Is there redundancy there so that they'll still work if they lose connectivity to the network?
So devices will, obviously they'll always work via their physical interfaces. Well, again, I say that based on how we do that. I'm assuming most others do it that way. At the end of the day, people expect a light switch to work like a light switch. So no matter what, even if you lose your connection, they'll continue to work. Then there's other things like systems where you might have settings in there, lights come on at dusk, off at dawn, those types of things. It's absolutely, depending on the systems, capable of doing that. It's just whether or not each product has that built into their design.
Yeah, I think that point that at the end of the day, people just want their light switch to work like a light switch is really important. I think that addressed the question. So that was a really good soundbite. Are there any smart hubs that wiring can come out of instead of individual devices, similar to a lighting control panel?
I'm not sure I understand that question.
Let's see. So I guess like instead of having the smart functions in each device, having like a central device in the home that would connect to all the controls. And then be able to operate from that one central device. Yeah, again, I'm not sure I quite understand it. If there are systems that exist today, we have a brand called Vantage Controls in which they have centralized controllers which actually control the lights out in all the various types of the house. And you decide where you want to put the user interfaces to control them. So I think the answer to that is yes to that. I'm not sure if the meaning of that question was to actually have like a one centralized dashboard area in which to control all the lights. While that should be feasible, in research I did on a home automation project a long time ago, that actually didn't go over very well with consumers. So technically possible, but not sure, and certainly be worth asking again. The world changed a lot in the last 8 years, but in the past when we had actually looked at a centralized dashboard, it wasn't a big hit. Okay. Is there a device to help us identify when a device is on or running, like a sump pump that sends a message to let us know it is running?
So the way that these devices can work, mine and others, is you have the ability via the app to know whether or not a device is on, or whether or not a device is alive and active. So the answer to that is yes. There's probably some things that we can do in the future that might make that question even more interesting to you.
Okay. Is there a device that can let us know the status of our electrical service, whether a complete power outage or a lost phase?
So we don't make that currently today here, but there are products out there that do. In fact, there's an interesting product from a company called Sense that actually monitors the power quality coming into the house all the time, and it actually fingerprints the electrical profile of the house. And over time, it can learn which devices are which. It's very, very interesting technology. So there's a lot of upside for where we'll be able to go with a lot of these types of things in the future. On the commercial side, there are systems that absolutely can do that as well today.
Okay. A few years ago, there were a lot of utility rebates for efficient lamps. Do you know of any utility rebates for energy-saving IoT devices? Not yet, or not at this time at least. I'm not aware of any of those. That would be great though. But no, I'm not aware of any right now. interesting idea. Do you guys have any research that our listeners can access online or ask to be sent to them?
So we certainly probably have some white paper information, and I'm more than happy to share some of the data sources where I get my data. I spend a lot of time on this presentation talking about voice because, again, it really kind of changed the value proposition for us. There's some really good resources to read about where that whole world is going. Voicebot.ai. And I used to manually comb through a ton of research, and this one website now does it all for you. So if you're interested in any of that type of stuff, and it's not just smart speakers, it has to do with cell phones and what's going on in automobiles, great information there. There's a host of other places we can get you some links. I can get you links of what I look at a lot to try and gather information. So yeah, we'll follow up and get you what we have, and then other places I go to look.
Okay. This listener, his or her experience, most devices they've seen, like 3- or 4-way switches, need modules to piggyback on each other, and they're concerned about the cost there. What's the current status on it, or are manufacturers moving away from that?
Well, there's actually a number of different ways to do this, and in fact, they're done a number of different ways in the marketplace, as the listener mentioned. One of the products that we just did was, again, we're trying to, with this Wi-Fi product we just launched, we're trying to make it as simple and as easy as possible. The 3-way switch is designed to work with any existing 3-way switch, so you can put it either on the side closest to the panel, the hot, or the closest to the load. And we actually got a little intellectual property we're trying to get captured on that. And then on the smart dimmer, we do use some specialized dimmers because they need to control and talk back, but we've tried to reduce the cost of that as much as we can to avoid the piggybacking of all those costs. But as a product manager, I can assure you that that is on one of the very tops of a lot of the lists that I have, is to try and simplify both the installation of those types of products, but also the cost.
Okay, we're getting close to 3. There's some I want to make sure we get to. Are there any ways commercial subcontractors can start preparing for IoT technology? So
certainly, take a look at the various things that we have on our website. We're constantly trying to share and showcase use cases. The commercial side of our business does that as well. Certainly, there are going to be other things that we can continue to do, working with folks like you, Tim, to constantly try and raise the level of the ocean here.
Awesome. Do you have any suggestions for education or further for implementation for specifically in the elderly example, or for someone who's not savvy with the technology?
Not off the top of my head. That's a good question. One of the biggest gaps we have seen coming into this is it still is it's really been, and I mentioned those 3 consumer types earlier, they tend to be very technically savvy, going to get the information themselves. We're now at that gap as we start to move to mass market, where we're going to have to be, as an industry, educating. And so we've started work on that here. I imagine others are. So that sounds like something we should continue to work on collectively.
Okay. So the last question I want to end on is on the similar vein. Let's say one of our listeners wants to take the first step, or convince a homeowner to take a first step into IoT products. Where would you recommend they start?
I would start with a device like our Wi-Fi device. Practically well, number one, if you're going to do IoT, you already have Wi-Fi in your house. So simply pick a device that you want to try out in your house, and we can start as simply as just a plug-in. Or you can go to in-wall types of products, download the app, and just try it out. It really is straightforward, and we're really working to make this as simple and as easy as possible for everyone involved.
Okay, fantastic. All right, Tom, it's 3 o'clock now, so I think we got to go ahead and wrap up. But do you have any final thoughts you want to add before we go?
No, I just want to thank everyone for taking time out of their day to listen to the work that we've been seeing and doing as an industry. And you actually brought up a bunch of great questions that have stirred a lot of thoughts on my end. So we'll do some more homework on our end and get you even better information as we continue to go forward. Great. Well, on behalf of Electrical Contractor and Legrand, I want to thank everyone once again for attending. I want to thank you, Tom. This presentation was great. I also agree. I think the Q&A was fantastic. And I want to remind everybody to be on the lookout for the recording of this event. I'll send you a notification about it in email soon, probably this afternoon. So I'm going to go ahead and end the event now, and we hope to see everyone in a future webinar.